What if the Anneliese Michel exorcism was real? Anneliese Michel was born on 21 September 1952 in Leutershausen, Bavaria. Her parents, Josef and Anna Michel, were devout Catholics. Her father worked in a factory. Her mother as a housewife. Anneliese was the third of 4 children. By every account of her childhood, she was ordinary, quiet, religious, studious. She wanted to become a teacher. She was accepted to the University of Würzburg in 1971 to study for her primary school certificate. Her classmates remembered her as serious and well-liked. Nothing in those years suggested the next chapter. That chapter began on 3 August 1968, when Anneliese was 16. She was lying in bed when the room started to spin. Her mother heard the thump. By the time Anna Michel reached the bedroom, Anneliese was on the floor, unable to speak, her body rigid. Doctors at the time would have called it a grand mal seizure. The seizures recurred for years. Some came in clusters, others struck at night. The worst came in church, which embarrassed her deeply. She was eventually diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, a form of the disease that originates in a specific region of the brain. She was prescribed anticonvulsant medication. By 1973, the seizures had... In the autumn of 1975, Anneliese's behavior began to change. She refused to look at religious objects. She would turn her face away from crosses. She would spit when she walked past a statue of the Virgin Mary. The family were regular churchgoers, and Anneliese had been a believing Catholic all her life, so the change was deeply unsettling. Her parents asked her what was wrong. Anneliese told them she could hear voices telling her she was damned. The same voices, she said, told her she had been condemned to hell. They came, she insisted, from inside the walls themselves. Her parents did not know what to do. They took her back to a neurologist who adjusted her medication. The medication did not help. The voices kept coming. In the spring of 1975, the family contacted their parish priest, Father Ernst Alt. Alt had been trained in Jesuit exorcism practice at a course held in Munich. He was cautious at first. He interviewed Anneliese and reported that he could not find any ordinary cause for her condition. He consulted with the Bishop of Würzburg, Josef Stangl. Bishop Stangl eventually authorized a formal exorcism under the Rituale Romanum of 1614, the old Roman ritual of exorcism that had been used for centuries. 2 priests would conduct the rites. The first was Father Alt himself. The second was Father Arnold Renz, an older priest with more experience in what the Catholic Church delicately calls the ministry of liberation. The exorcisms would begin in September 1975. They would continue with a few short breaks until July 1976. In all, there would be 67 of them. Anneliese Michel was 23 years old when the first one started. She would be dead by the time the last one ended. The exorcisms took place in the Michel family home in Klingenberg am Main, the small Bavarian town where they had moved. The sessions were held in the living room with the family present. Father Alt and Father Renz led the prayers. The room was often lit only by candles. The priests used the Latin forms of the Rituale Romanum, the ancient prayers and formulas that had been part of Catholic exorcism practice for 4 centuries. Anneliese would respond to the prayers. According to the priests, she would answer in Latin, in a voice that did not sound like her own. She would answer in Greek, a language she had never studied. She would answer in tongues that the priests said they could not identify at all. The religious medals drew her spitting. The rosary chains snapped in her hands. Her body would stiffen in ways that 2 grown men could not bend, an apparent demonstration of strength that the priests interpreted as a sign of possession. Over the 11 months of the rites, Anneliese's condition deteriorated. She stopped taking her anticonvulsant medication, reportedly because the voices told her that the drugs were evil. She stopped eating. Meat was the first to go. then anything that came from a living animal. She fasted on bread, water, and occasional spoonfuls of rice. Her parents watched the weight fall off her. Her cheeks hollowed. Her eyes receded. Her legs weakened. By the spring of 1976, she could not climb the stairs without help. Her parents carried her to the sessions. The priests kept going. According to the records later entered in court, the priests asked the demon to identify itself more than 200 times during the rituals. They believed that an exorcism could not succeed until the demon was named and commanded. The demon, the priests claimed, gave 6 different names. Anneliese said she could see things the family could not. She identified her attackers as Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Cain, and Hitler. The demons, she said, had been assigned to her since she was small. During the exorcisms, Anneliese is said to have displayed what witnesses described as hidden knowledge. According to the parents, she named the secret sins of family members and of the priests themselves. She identified objects in the room that no one had mentioned to her. The priests later testified that she quoted long passages of Latin scripture that she had never formally learned. In some cases, including verses from books of the Bible the family did not own. The same testimony describes answers in ancient Aramaic, in a perfect classical Greek, and in a form of German that the priests could not place. The witness list, in a case that was otherwise brutally simple, included the parents, the 2 priests, occasional visitors to the house, and a handful of family friends. None of them were trained in the discernment of supernatural phenomena. All of them, including her parents, were deeply religious. All of them, including her parents, believed that Anneliese was possessed. The medical diagnosis in life, by contrast, was straightforward. The record shows temporal lobe epilepsy confirmed at the university hospital. The treating physicians had prescribed Tegretol and other anticonvulsants. Anneliese had stopped taking them under the influence, her parents would later say, of the voices. Temporal lobe epilepsy is a complex disorder. Some patients present with seizures that look like a trance state. Others experience feelings of terror during the aura. The classic symptoms include olfactory and visual phenomena that the patient cannot control. Sleep deprivation and malnutrition can both worsen the disease, and Anneliese was suffering from both by the time of the later rituals. Some studies have suggested that certain forms of temporal lobe epilepsy can be associated with hyper-religiosity, with the patient experiencing intense religious visions. The medical establishment in 1975 understood the disease. The Michel family did not want to hear about the disease. They wanted an exorcism. They got one. They kept it. On the morning of 1 July 1976, Anneliese Michel was found dead in her bed. The cause of death was obvious to the family and to the priests. 11 months of fasting had left her emaciated. Solid food had been impossible for weeks. Water could not be kept down for at least the last 3 days of her life. She weighed, by the time of the autopsy, about 31 kilograms, 68 pounds. The autopsy report, signed by Dr. Gerhard Valentin of the Bavarian State Forensic Institute, found the cause of death to be malnutrition and dehydration complicated by the underlying epilepsy. The official ruling was death by natural causes. The case, however, could not end there. The family told the authorities what had been happening in the house. The priests told the authorities what they had been doing. 2 criminal charges were filed. One of negligent homicide against the parents. One of negligent homicide against the priests. The trial began in March 1978 at the district court in Aschaffenburg. The trial was, by all accounts, an unusual one. The parents and the priests did not deny what they had done. They said they had done it on the instructions of the Catholic Church and at the explicit authorization of the Bishop of Würzburg. The defense lawyers argued that the defendants had been acting in good faith in accordance with a recognized rite of the Church in response to what they believed to be a genuine case of possession. The prosecution argued that the defendants had known that Anneliese was ill, that they had stopped her medication, that they had failed to provide her with food and water, that she had died as a direct result of their decision to treat her with exorcism instead of medicine. The judge asked Bishop Stangl to testify about whether the exorcism had been properly authorized. The bishop refused to appear. The case went to the jury. The verdict, after 7 hours of deliberation, was guilty on all 4 defendants. The sentence was 6 months in prison, suspended, plus 3 years of probation. None of the 4 defendants served any time in custody. Bishop Stangl, asked later about the case, said only that he had made a grave error in judgment. He died in 1989. The case of Anneliese Michel became, almost overnight, the most famous case of alleged demonic possession in the 20th century. The Catholic Church has always maintained that demonic possession is a real phenomenon, distinct from mental illness, and that exorcism is a legitimate response to it when properly authorized and conducted. The case forced the Church to look carefully at the modern rite of exorcism. The old ritual of 1614 had been replaced in 1999 by a new, revised rite that placed much greater emphasis on the medical screening of the supposed possessed person before any exorcism could begin. The new rite requires that a team of physicians, psychiatrists, and clergy first rule out any natural explanation. The new rite also explicitly forbids any exorcism that endangers the health of the subject. Anneliese Michel could not, under the new rite, have been treated as she was. The Catholic Church has never formally declared Anneliese Michel to have been possessed, and has never formally declared the case to be a case of possession. The Church has, in effect, treated it as a tragic medical and pastoral failure. The Diocese of Würzburg has consistently refused to comment on whether the original authorization was valid. The 2 priests involved in the rituals, Father Alt and Father Renz, have largely disappeared from public view. Father Alt died in 2010. Father Renz died in 2017. Their defenders, including a number of Catholic traditionalists, have continued to argue that the case was a genuine possession and that the deaths of the 2 priests, who both suffered long illnesses before their deaths, were connected in some way to the case. None of these claims has been supported by the medical evidence. The case remains, in Catholic terms, an open question. In 2005, a Hollywood film based on the case was released. The film, called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, took considerable liberties with the actual events, but the core of the story was recognizable. A young Catholic woman, allegedly possessed, dies during the course of an exorcism. A priest goes on trial for her death. The film grossed nearly $150 million worldwide. It also gave the case a new public life. The case had been known in Germany for decades, but the film brought it to a global audience. Skeptics, including the German magazine Der Spiegel, used the case to argue that belief in demonic possession is a dangerous residue of medieval superstition. Believers, including a number of Catholic and Orthodox commentators, used the case to argue that the modern medical establishment is too quick to dismiss reports of possession. The case became a touchstone in the wider culture war over religion and reason. Several books have been written about the case in the years since. The most thorough investigation, Felicitas D. Goodman's The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel, included long interviews with the parents and with some of the witnesses. The book took a sympathetic view of the family, presenting them as sincere believers who had been failed by the Church and by the medical system. Other books, including Thomas Riplinger's The Dark Side of the Cross, presented the case as a paradigm of religious abuse. The case has also been used in psychology textbooks as a case study of the harm that can be done when family members substitute religious ritual for medical treatment. Whatever the interpretation, the case is now a permanent feature of the literature on possession, exorcism, and the limits of religious belief. In the end, the case of Anneliese